before we get into today's episode, Brax and I wanted to thank you for joining us. Let you know you can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at Angle Fantasy BB. We have a Discord that you can join. You can join through the link down below. Also, the link to our WordPress is going to be down below as well. Also, this podcast will be available on streaming platforms of Spotify and Apple Music. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We are now on episode 2. Got a lot to talk about today. It is now the second week of the season for the NBA. There's been a lot of news already, and there's already been a major trade. But before we get into all of that, I did have to discuss that we do have another analyst over at Angle and Fantasy Sports. Braxton, how you doing today, bud?
Pretty good. I'm really excited to finally be able to get on. I was missing out last week, but I feel pretty good. I'm excited.
So I've been stuck in an office all week working with people who don't watch basketball, and I need to talk with somebody about this James Harden trade. So, as you can see from the article right here, what was the overall trade again? So it was Harden and PJ Tucker and Petrusev went to the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers since it was two firsts, Robert Covington, right? KJ
Batum, Marcus Morris.
Batum and Marcus Morris. Yeah, just a shit ton of
KJ
power forwards. Yes, exactly. And then OKC got involved. And what was the details of that again too? It's like the worst of OKC or Houston or Philadelphia or something for one of those.
Yeah, there's like some kind of 3 or 4 team swap right, worst of, second worst of, things like that in there. All of it pretty minute details. Where we're talking maybe 2 or 3 spots in the order here. So
right.
Not necessarily a significant difference between the picks there.
Mm-hmm. And then Petrusev's now going to the Kings too. So when looking at it, yeah, there it is, clearing ways for, yeah. So when looking at it too, obviously Oklahoma City getting involved to, just gain more pick assets as they usually do. So the Clippers, in a sense, I mean, they do still obviously have size with both Zubac and Plumlee are still there, but just so many of these wing players, which is so coveted within the NBA, they just sent 4 of them to Philadelphia. And they did get PJ Tucker back, but I think PJ is pushing 37 now. Obviously not 39. I was 2 years short. My goodness. And so obviously, yeah, with that thought too, obviously Harden's not a wing himself. Does this expose a huge defensive liability in the Clippers if obviously one of PG or Kawhi aren't playing?
Yeah, I think it can really it'll really test to the depth of some of these lower end guys in Los Angeles. In my head, I kind of view it as they've kind of tied up all their loose ends with essentially a bunch of garbage outside of KJ Martin. I really like KJ Martin, but really just kind of packaging all of this random stuff they have together, shipping it off to Philadelphia, and now with these. Shipping off to Philadelphia. And now the question is, what are they going to do, right? Are they going to play, guys like Kobe Miller more? Are they going to play Kobe Brown and Jordan Miller more? Or are they just going to go heavy minutes for PJ Tucker and, Plumlee and Zubac are going to play. They're not going to be on the court at the same time, right? So there's a big, massive gap there at the 3-4 spots that I think it'll be really interesting to see if maybe they bring somebody in off the street or, they're able to trade some random second-round pick for somebody who could potentially help them. Or if they just want to shift everybody up one and play Westbrook the heavy minutes that he's been able to play, in addition to playing Tucker, 35, 36 minutes like he has recently.
Mm-hmm. And I know Ty Lue can probably get creative in a lot of different ways too, because the one thing that we have seen Harden and Westbrook be able to coexist. We've seen it 2 times already. So we at least know that them 2 are able to work together. And then with PG and Kawhi mixed in too, it just adds 2 layers of guys that are able to play, lockdown defense when they're healthy and engaged. And also too, with that said, the Clippers did get to keep Terrence Mann, which was a huge talking point for them. So, maybe there is going to be ways where they mix him in, because I know there's been rotations at times where he's even played power forward before, even though I think he's only like 6'5". So,
Right.
I think they're just planning to go with, a lot with heavy minutes for him. They could easily probably pick up somebody else. I think they do have a roster spot. We could probably look into that. And then I also too wonder if, like you mentioned, Brown, Miller, BJ Boston is still there too. I was actually surprised to see that he didn't go to Philly. I thought that would be somebody that they might be interested in, or, something like that. But they got four very experienced players, even though, KJ's not too experienced, but he's got a couple years in. And so, do you see a clear winner in this trade? Do you see more of an even trade?
I really like the Clippers side of it. Obviously, they kept Terrence Mann, like you said. And then just to elaborate a little bit further on what you were just talking about, Bones Highland is still there. Norm
That's
Powell is
right.
still there. So they do lose a lot of size. Like Bones and Norm are really not going to play anything higher than like a three. Bones probably, he's not going to guard anybody. So like I mentioned previously, that depth is going to be tested. I really don't like it for Philly at all. It seems like, they're not. It's clear they don't get better with this move. It really just seems like that Morey grabbed these assets in an effort just to be like done with it and reroute them later. And Andrew, I think I sent you the article talking about how ownership had interjected. I think it was late. Shams reported, late Monday or something, that Steve Ballmer and Josh Harris had gotten on a call, and the quote I think is to iron this out.
Mm-hmm.
And it really feels like uh, you know Sixers ownership was like, you get this done so we can move on with it and be done with our lives. And the rumors swirling now of like Zach LaVine, DeRozan, OG Anunoby. I read a report earlier that was like, the Sixers can get both DeRozan and LaVine and stay under the luxury tax. And I'm not really sure what assets they're going to do that with. And I'm not sure why the Bulls would take trash and a couple of first rounds for their two best players.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely another move to be had here for the Sixers. I
Mm-hmm.
think they created like a 6.1 or 6.3 million trade exception with this trade. So there's a few guys that can probably fit into that are absorb into that can help them. But I think right now, until we see some follow-up moves, I think Philly is definitely the clear loser in this trade.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that too. I think it's not necessarily a win now trade, but a trade to give them flexibility to do more win now moves in the future. So obviously that Bulls team is horrendous at the moment. I think that's, a pretty good candidate to break up if they don't figure anything out. It's either them, or if maybe like Jock Vaughn gets let go in Brooklyn, and one of those wings gets moved somewhere. There's a lot of possibility that Philly has now. So that's what this kind of gift is for them at the end of this, for the trade, is flexibility. They don't necessarily put better new players on the court right now, but they did gain more flexibility to potentially be able to do that in the future. So we'll see if they actually manage to, make a big move to get that asset in to help their win now window or not.
And real quick, I do want to add, it's in regards to fantasy, I don't really think there's any clear winners here. I think,
Yes.
usually when you see trades like this go down, there's usually like a role player or two that, oh, they're going to have this large opportunity now. I don't think there is one either, in Philly or in Los Angeles. Kelly Oubre was somebody who'd been not breaking out, but, uh, he's managed to like fall upwards into this massive usage for the last couple teams he's been on, with Charlotte and now Philly. And part of the hope, if you're a Oubre owner with the Harden trade, is that Harden would get moved and nobody significant would come back in terms of having minutes being played or usage. But I really think this kind of muddies his outlook as well, because I mean the report from whoever was saying that Nurse had said that Oubre would slot into the starting lineup temporarily, which is
Mhm.
not exactly a ringing endorsement. His stats have been good, but is his on-court production, or not production, but on-court impact enough for him to continue to play these heavy minutes, especially with guys like Batum, Covington, and Marcus Morris in town? Not that I think Batum or Marcus Morris are, you know, exceptionally good or anything, but Nurse has a tendency to play his starters really high minutes and his bench players not so high minutes. So it'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see. I think the guy who has the most to lose, I think, is Kelly Oubre. Westbrook might lose a little bit of usage with Harden having the ball in his hands more. I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't worry about Kawhi or Paul George. Harden, I think, might take a little bit of a hit though as well,
Right.
because he's not going to get every shot that he wants. A little bit reminiscent of how he looked in Brooklyn with Katie and Kyrie for the 22 games or whatever, where they were all healthy. So
Right, right, yeah. Well, he has shown the ability to take a step backwards in scoring, but he takes a massive step forward in assists whenever he does so. So,
right.
big trade all around. I did say in episode one, I expected it to go down either within the first 3 weeks, or it wasn't going to happen until like at the deadline, if it was even going to happen at all. So happy to see that it's done. I was even seeing some interesting lists of the amount of players that have been displaced due to a James Harden trade demand. That'll be coming out in my in my article pretty soon there. And so that was a pretty interesting list to see. There's a good amount of players that have had to be moved due to a James Harden trade demand over these years. So I'm glad that that one's done. Moving on into some fantasy basketball topics now. So over at Angle Fantasy Sports, we are running a few redraft leagues this year. We have two snake drafts. One was done on Yahoo, and the other one was done on Fantrax to accommodate international users. And then we also did an auction format draft ran by Brax over also on Yahoo for that one too. So for a quick overview of the snake draft here, as you can see onto the screen, checking out the standings right now. I'm currently in third. Mitchell is in fifth. Let's go through the top five. LGI to the day I die, the Unibrow Lord, myself, the baby food emoji, Mitchell, and Richard's remarkable team are rounding out the top six right now. Mitchell and myself are currently in a very heated 5-4 matchup, so there's going to be a good amount of bragging rights going on with this one here. These are always pretty epic whenever they go down. So that's the status of the Yahoo one. Over on Fantrax, here goes the top six. Myself, Ignaz, Mitchell are actually both tied for second place. Gabe Puster Posey in fourth. Van Buren Boys in fifth, and Weez Jome in sixth. Currently in a matchup with Ralph. That's going 2-7 at the moment. So these are both pretty fun leagues going on so far. Lots of activity going on in here. So we already went through a snake draft mock draft Mitch and I did in the first episode. So one thing we haven't gotten to talk about yet is auction drafts, and so that's what you went through for your league over here. Our third angle league, you did an auction format for this one. So taking a look on your screen now with your great team name, here's your roster right here. Take us through how that auction draft went for you and what your general strategy was when you were going through this one.
Yeah, so my strategy going into auction drafts, I like to, the whole advantage of going into an auction draft is that you can almost plan out exactly what you're going to be doing, at least early in the draft, or how you're going to build out your team. My strategy usually is to be very aggressive, especially early. I think the worst thing you can do is wait too long and you're left without like a first or second round type guy. In my advice, not that people are going to be doing auction drafts maybe until next year at this point, but you really want to identify one or two guys early that you want to build the team around, and pay almost any price for them. I mean, it really is important to me, I think, because the money doesn't mean anything after the draft, right?
Right.
And it's really important to me to get those guys that you want to build the team around, because the worst thing that can happen is you you end up building the team around somebody you had initially planned on, and then you're kind of on your back foot thinking about what kind of guys to surround them with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the price gets too extreme, obviously you can pivot to a secondary option, but you really just want to be able to assure that you're able to secure your first option or a player like it in your second option. I don't like the thinking to sit around and just kind of wait for guys that I constitute as steals. Some people will deploy that strategy where there's like a sweet spot in the draft to where people have spent a lot of their money,
Mm-hmm.
and some people are saving money for different guys. So you'll see some steals, right? But again, the whole advantage with the auctions is that you can just plan out almost everything you do uh, from the beginning, and then once you've grabbed those top guys, you're almost on the offensive, right?
Right.
You're able to plan ahead, be like, okay, late in the draft, I want to get D'Angelo Russell, right? As you see on my team there. And then when he's up, you're able to pounce on him. And you've already delegated a certain amount of your budget to guys like that. So, yeah, in regards to the team that I built specifically in this league, it ended up being kind of a soft blocks punt. I didn't really go in with a punt in mind. I did go in knowing I was going to get Jokic. I would have paid almost any price for Jokic. I think I got him for $73.
Okay.
I think I would have gone up to like 85 if I needed to, though. And I paired him with Luka, which I think is an unbelievable combo. I mean, you look at Jokic and everybody knows how impactful he is on, any fantasy team, right? So I just said this like 5 times, right? But the whole point is that you're able to get the guys that you want. So, I want Jokic, I want the best player. So I bid whatever I wanted to for him. I thought Luka would be a fun pairing with him. I had never owned Luka prior to this season. And I paired those two together, and then I filled it out with role players that, able to hold their own. You look at Jalen Duren, Tyus Jones. I grabbed Jalen Johnson on waivers. That's another thing too, especially when you deploy like not the stars and scrubs strategy. I don't like that name.
Uh-huh.
It's more of like, you get your top guys and then you get other guys. But something you got to be doing early on is you're going to be diligent on the waiver wire, even more so than you would be normally. So Jalen Johnson was somebody that I grabbed, made a trade, grabbed Kyle Kuzma,
Mm.
just filling out guys that really complement both Luka and Jokic's stats really well. The only weird fit is kind of Duren, just because, if you look at the team, a lot of the other guys that I have can kind of do a little bit of everything, where Duren's more of a points and rebounds kind of guy. Obviously, early he's been incredible. I
Right.
don't expect the assists that he's gotten and the steals to keep up, but you just take value where you can get it. So I think I got Durant for like $4, and that's the kind of thing you need to happen if you're going to build a successful team this way. So it's been doing pretty well so far. This isn't really a team because of the build that you're going to win 8-1 a lot with, just because of the lack of blocks, and the free throw is kind of iffy on some cases. But and obviously I don't have to spell this out for a lot of people, right? But if you're winning 6-3 on a consistent basis, you'll be the number one team in the league. So that's all you need to do.
All right. Yeah. And one thing that I pointed out to you when you showed me this roster initially too was you still managed to get a couple of top 100 guys despite going, with 2 top 3 guys or 2 top 5 guys. Managing to still get Tyus Jones, to still get Kyle Kuzma was awesome. Marcus Smart could be in the top 100 too. D'Angelo Russell usually teeters around the border basically of being in top 100 or like top 120. PJ Washington, pretty much same situation too. Jalen Johnson was an excellent pickup. Duren, I think is going to just bring you so many value with just the games, because obviously rebounds is in your build. So the games where Duren's going to grab, 13 of them or something like that's going to be huge for you. But another point too, someone who we're going to make a video on pretty soon, or a video coming out for us pretty soon, is Brandon Miller, who I see you also picked up too. So being, over there in Charlotte as a Hornets fan, tell me what you've been seeing from Brandon Miller so far. Are you excited about what you guys have drafted?
Yeah, I think the bust allegations have been silenced, right? You look at, and not that he needs to be compared to Scoot Henderson his entire career, but you look at
Right.
what Scoot has been doing, and if Scoot was doing that in Charlotte, I feel like you'd never hear the end of it.
Uh-huh.
That MJ messed up and grabbed the wrong guy. Brandon Miller is exactly what this team needs. They needed it. He's doing what Miles Bridges was supposed to be doing last season, as that secondary scorer behind LaMelo and Terry with the potential to be a leading scorer on a given night. LaMelo obviously has been not terrible, but he's shooting something like 24% over the first 4 games on high volume. And they've gone 1-3, but Miller has been there to pick up some of the slack. The defensive stats aren't really there yet. We knew that going in, but he looks a lot more competent on the floor than I think some people thought he was going to. And based on the way that he had played in the summer league and preseason. So I'm very excited about him. Exactly what the team needs. And when Miles Bridges comes back, it'll be interesting to see how much usage he takes up. I still think, obviously, Miller's going to be a massive priority, especially with Bridges on that qualifying offer. It'll be interesting to see if they prioritize him a little bit less in terms of playing time. I know Steve Clifford did say him and PJ are be playing a significant amount, but Miller, I think, has been a lot better than I think anybody has anticipated. With that first game where they won, the Hornets don't win the game without Brandon Miller and some of those plays he had made. So he's going to be a big part of this team for a long time.
Very cool. And you got to witness that one too, which makes it even better.
Yes, exactly.
So great. So, great setup here. So these leagues, we're going to keep doing them every year, these redraft leagues. And so if you want us to talk about you, then, make it into, we do write-ups for the leagues for sure. When the draft ends, we do a write-up doing like a power ranking of the league and then discussing everybody's best and worst picks and just their general outlook for the year. And then in our podcast, we will review, who's in the playoff picture, the top 6 throughout the year, how things are going. And then, of course, too, if any of us analysts are matched up in the league, we will keep pretty close track of that one. So I'm sure Twitter might be seeing the results of Mitchell versus myself from this week at some point soon. So that covers redraft. But now let's get into a subject of this is how you and I met in the first place, which is Dynasty basketball. So Dynasty basketball is something I encourage any basketball lover to do. Dynasty basketball is the fantasy format that enables you to keep your players current or permanently. So in this type of format, it's so very important to have players that you genuinely enjoy watching, just because for some reason the emotional impact feels so much greater when you watch them do well for a roster that you've constructed on a permanent basis instead of one where you're picking from a new pool of players every single year. So there's lots of different ways to be able to play Dynasty. There's different platforms that offer it, different league sizes, different scoring settings that you can do. There's a whole lot of different options. So we're going to discuss, what our favorite format is to play. This is the only one that I've known so far in regards to Dynasty basketball, and that's going to be done on the platform of Fantrax. So we know that the Dynasty can exist for ones like Sleeper. I think ESPN can even do them too. But for starters, like in regards to Sleeper, great app, amazing for football, especially Dynasty football. But it's just the points leagues. So in regards to the points leagues, I 100% get why people play them. I get it, especially when they're new to fantasy basketball. That sometimes can be what they tend to do first is a points league because it most replicates football. And I don't know about you, but it's like myself and most people I know where if basketball is not the only sport that they watched, they likely played fantasy football as their first format of any type of fantasy sport. That's normally how it is. But with that being said, that's kind of why people want to stick to the points format. But I think points belongs in pretty much every fantasy sport besides basketball. When you involve the 9 categories scoring is when so much more skill factor and strategy becomes involved. When people reach out to us and say, what do you think my team needs? And it's a points league team. Well, the answer is always more points. There's not really any other strategy to it other than more points. But when it comes to a 9 category team, there's all sorts of answers. You need more blocks. You need more rebounds. You need to trade him. He doesn't fit. You need someone that's better fitting. So 9 categories is obviously the way to go. And so when there's, apps like Sleeper that only offer points, again, I get it. Sleeper is a good app, but I would encourage people who haven't tried it yet to try out 9 categories. I promise you, I've always had so much reluctance on which new format I want to get into. So for starters, I started redraft. Then Mitchell got into Dynasty. He got into Dynasty 1 year before me. The whole time I was unsure if I wanted to do it. Then I did it the next year with him, became obsessed. Then he got into what we're going to come into next, which is a 30 team league. He got into that before me. I said, there's no way. There's no way I'll know players that deep. I took a look at his roster and I was like, oh, actually, I know every single player on this roster. Did that. Now I can't possibly imagine another league size that I would do for Dynasty basketball. So, with that being said, let's head over to the 30 team, one of the 30 team leagues that we have here. So, Brax, talk to me about with these large size dynasties like this, you're usually going to only be starting, either 5 or 6 players, and then we'll have a bench of around 7. So there'll be usually be 12 on your roster in total, and 2 players that'll be held in the minor slot. So a minor slot is generally going to be a player that's played less than 82 games. That's usually what the general rule is. And so in these types of formats, you can see all types of different builds, all types of different value. And there's even formats where we were able to play salary too. So, like I said, Dynasty, 30 team Dynasty leagues is how you and I met. So just talk to me about, how you also got into Dynasty and how, basically your love also for 30 team dynasties.
So I guess I mean how I got into Dynasty was, for lack of a better word, I was just kind of looking to upgrade my fantasy basketball experience, right? I mean the redraft is one thing, and then like you said, a Dynasty is just a whole other level. I mean, and my first I guess foray with Dynasty was a 30 team league. So I think it's so hard I just can't imagine going back to anything less. I mean, it's really just as but and the whole point of Dynasty, right, is to build your own team. You're building like a real team. You're going from year to year. You're making draft picks, whatever. 30 team is literally just about as close in salary is literally just about as close as you can get to building a real team. I'm like you said, they rostered 12 to 14 guys. That's a little bit under what real NBA rosters have. But these are so deep, and the waiver wire is so thin that I feel like people who have a better grasp on some things are able to outplay their league mates more so in a league with more so than they would be able to in a league with less people, where maybe it's a little bit more luck based, right? I mean, every team has some good players on it, and to mention like the points leagues, like you said, something that affects the points leagues more so than category leagues is it's luck, right? It plays out like fantasy football a lot of the times. So in terms of my favorite format, it's 30 team. You got salary, so there's another factor that you have to worry about. It kind of builds parity between teams. It doesn't let the top teams sit at the top as long. 30 team salary, 9 category, and I just don't think it gets better than that. I mean, I really don't think I could imagine playing a different format in terms of Dynasty at this point. Obviously, we do the redrafts and stuff still because I gotta have more than a couple leagues, but
Yeah.
the deep Dynasty leagues are really where it's at. And they take up a lot of brain power, but I think in a good way. So.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely, I agree. And so, the one that I first started to play with you in as well was a 30 team. This one's without salary. Shout out to this league. This is known as the Court. This is the first 30 team that I was in. So, just a couple of examples. So, again, for those of you that have never been in a league of this size, some of you are thinking, am I ever going to know a roster this deep? All right. So I feel like there's a good amount of NBA fans who's going to know who John Conchar is. John Conchar. Okay. What about Cole Swider, Dominic Barlow, Tumani Kamara? This is where you're approaching the end of what a 30 team roster might look like. So this one's mine in this league right here. Again, this has no salary attached. So I'm not 100% sure if this team could exist in real life or not. But, led by a core, I have Shea. I did end up getting Scoot Henderson this year. I'm very, very excited to have Dynasty investment in him. I have Alperen Sengun, who's one of my absolute favorite Dynasty assets in general. So that's those two right there. I also have Bruce Brown, CJ McCollum. Also to Bobby Portis is one of my favorite players, and Contavious Caldwell Pope the Laker who I miss the very most. So that's just an example of what a 30 team can look like. I'm the Lakers in this league. We can check out the Clippers, which you guessed it is Mitchell. Looking at a couple of players here, we got Cade Cunningham. He's got Paulo. He's also got Paul Reed. He's got Luka Doncic, Jaime Jaquez, John Kuminga. He has Amen Thompson, Mark Williams. Again, this is a team where he gets to watch this core of players for, a decade if he decides to keep this core right here together, which is, the best part about this type of stuff. So in a league of this size, the type of investments you get to make. Also, too, one thing that gets brought into this league is the draft. So we have full 60-player drafts. So we're talking, we actually have a second round too. And the feeling that you get when a second round pick actually does hit is pretty indescribable. So that's just a whole other added element of fun too. You're actually going to start looking into draft rankings beyond pick 30 now too. Now looking
Andrew, could be
into,
good to take a look at the waiver wire too to see what the waiver
ooh,
wire looks like in that kind of league.
that's a great idea. All right, so let's also give some guys an example of what the waiver wire is going to look like. So in this league right here, I mean, pretty thin options. We're looking at Jeff Green, Sam Merrill, Svi Mikhailiuk, Anthony Gill, Luke Cornett, Jordan McLaughlin, Davis Bertans, Lamar Stevens. So yes, you are right. These waiver wires do get very, very thin. Now there is obviously potential for sometimes big names to pop onto waiver wires. Like for example, there was a huge scramble at the beginning of this season to get Alexander Vezinkov or Vasilij Micic because the waiver wire was where they belonged. These were not draftable players. They were either on the waiver wire or they were already on somebody's roster, which I did see happen in one of my leagues too. Every once in a while you'll get these players that hit the wire. We're a big fab battle. So the free agent auction budget fab battles go on to get these guys, especially too sometimes when we get into a salary league. Sometimes these two-way players who are only making $500,000 in regards to these salary leagues can become pretty big, especially when they're on a squad that has a lot of injuries and they're getting good playing time. If you're a team in one of these salary leagues that is pretty top heavy, you have good players that make a lot of money, so you don't really have much going on with your bench. These two-way guys who make cheap money really, really come into play here. And so that's where I would say you probably see a little bit more activity on the wire is in these salary leagues, especially too. Sometimes guys like a Kyle Lowry, one of our teams, we saw him become not rostered. There's guys where they're just simply getting paid too much and they're not worth being rostered for the type of production that they're putting up too. So looking at one of the salary leagues that we're in here, this is one that all three of us angle analysts are in right here. Now, obviously, I know what you're thinking for someone listening to this that is not in a salary league right now. How am I going to be able to keep track of all of this? How am I going to know what's going on? Well, number one recommendation is if you start, a Google Sheets or some type of spreadsheet to just keep track of your current player salaries as well as your player salaries moving on from year to year. And there's different websites out there that help you out with that. One, for example, would be Spot Track. So taking a look at this one right here, this is Jaylen Brown's contract. He's currently making $28 million this year for this season. But as you can see right here, this website is showing what he's going to be making on his new contract going up until 2028, 2029. So starting next year, he's going to start making $49.7 million. With that in mind, too, usually these salary leagues are going to have a tax cap, and we usually follow what the NBA luxury tax is. So right now it's 165 million. So keep in mind too, yes, these players, their salaries keep getting bigger and bigger, but the luxury tax keeps going up and up and up. I think this year we just got 12 million in cap space, and I'm pretty sure it's going to go up by even more for next year too. So Brax, tell me about your just what you like to do team wise in regards to salary league. I'll pull up your squad
Yeah,
right here.
so yeah, I mean, this is a little bit different than the auction strategy I talked a little bit about earlier, was where I think depth is really king in leagues this deep as in 30 team, especially salary. since there's essentially no waiver pickups, and every once in a while, like some of those two-way guys that you had mentioned who make 500K can be big, or somebody who like an in-season signing, or somebody that comes to mind is Chris Dunn last season.
Mm,
He very well could have won some people some leagues, especially in leagues this deep, just because of how much he was producing and the price that you got him at, which was free. I mean, he wasn't on a team for most of the year. But sorry, to get back on track, since there's essentially no waiver pickups, you really have to make sure your bench is really stocked full. On a top heavy team, one injury really kills you, and this is the kind of strategy that I've deployed across my leagues. I will note that sometimes you'll find that it's tough to get certain builds or punts in this league, in these leagues, just because most players that can fit any particular build are not necessarily as accessible as they'd be in other leagues. So a lot of times you'll see teams just trying to accumulate the most talent that they can, and then other times you'll see some teams deploy a soft punt for various categories, just because it's the best that you can do in redraft leagues. Not that it's easy, but it's very much more attainable to do like a punt free throw build. Whereas, in a 30-team league or in a salary league with these outside factors, affecting your ability to put a team together, it's a lot more difficult to get, elite guys that fit any particular build. So, like I mentioned, you'll kind of just sometimes you'll be in a spot where you're just accumulating wealth. And one more thing is that you kind of want to structure the contracts in a way to
mm-hmm.
where you don't necessarily need to be thinking 2-3 years ahead all the time, but sometimes you kind of want to have at least 1 year ahead in the back of your mind, because if you get to a point where all of your players are just like on big contracts, you're going to lose a lot of value, almost giving players away sometimes. So I wouldn't say like make big moves that you lose a lot of value in the year before, just like, oh, I got to get this contract gone because next year I'm not going to be able to afford it. But it's something you want to have in the back of your head to where, okay, I've got a couple rookie contracts. I've got, for example, Karl-Anthony Towns, who's about to start making 50 million or whatever. I'm going to pair him with Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, David Roddy, guys like that who are on controllable rookie deals for a few years. It's really just about flexibility for me. You want to be as flexible as possible at any given moment. And sometimes if you load up on those big contracts or get into a position where you only have big contracts, you lose a lot of that flexibility, and in turn lose a lot of leverage in trade negotiations and your ability to put a team together. So
Yeah, and with all that being said, a couple things you were going back to a couple things you were saying there too. Number one was just the parity in these leagues and how, sometimes your salary can get to a point where it forces trades. So that's another benefit of these type of salary leagues is, in a non-salary league, a guy can sit on his top team and not have to do anything. He could just continue to rake in money year after year. And by the way, these leagues usually pay out money once you make it to the second round of playoffs. It's not like there's only 30 teams and only 3 people win. There's 30 teams and, around 8 or so people are going to win some money. So it does give a, more generous payout, and then obviously a very large payout to someone who's going to win first place. But with that being said, in regards to these salary leagues, it forces trades due to the way different contracts are going to come up. Obviously, these teams are built with players that are on different real NBA rosters. So all these types of contracts aren't going to fully line up with each other. So that's why some of these top teams will have to make trades. A certain contract coming up is going to force their hand to where they will have to do something. I just had a recently did that with Jaylen Brown, more so just getting out ahead of his contract, because I was more so thinking 1 year ahead with that one because this is his final year here. But like you said, you lose value when you're in a point where you lose leverage. So when these guys know that you have no cap space or you're in the negative and you need to do something to have a legal roster, then that's when, you're pretty much giving away people for free. And with that being said too, it gives you a much broader understanding of why some certain deals happen in the real life NBA. Like, for example, the Harden deal too, to the common eye, the people are just like, well, they just got, 4 bums and, two teenagers for James Harden, whereas, we know too that they got picks as well as cap flexibility too. Two things that are huge for acquiring somebody, whether it's going to be in the midseason most likely for them or in the off season too. Swinging some kind of deal where they can pick somebody they like instead of getting somebody else through some different types of means. So with that too, looking at your team, like you mentioned, you have Karl Anthony Towns. This is coupled with good rookie contracts with, Christian Brown. You have Peyton Watson here, David Roddy. I'm hoping my boy Jalen Pickett gets some playing time soon. You still got team-friendly deals for LaMelo Ball and Isaiah Stewart. So going back to, when new contracts come up, both those names I just said are going to force, potentially some action for you, depending on what other contracts shake out for you on here too. So that's when names like Brown and Watson and Roddy are going to become even more valuable for you as well too. We'll take a look really quick at Mitch's team right here. So he went with a little bit more of a top-heavy approach, and so this is what will happen when you go with big stars, big salary guys. However, with that being said, I think that this roster right here is built out pretty well. He does have Jalen Green. He tends to have Jalen Green in a lot of his dynasties. He believes in his boy. Jason Tatum is here now. He's got Zubac. He's got Devin Booker. He's also got Brandon Ingram. So that's three $30 million players. And so you can see where a lot of that cap space went automatically. We got 160, and that's 90 right off the board right there. So went with a little bit more of a top-heavy approach on this one. But he does have, star players where when they're all playing, they're all healthy, which, so far, at least besides Booker, so far they have been. They're going to be, especially in a league where you can only start 5 or 6, that's huge, where of those 5 or 6, 3 of them are Jason Tatum, Brandon Ingram, and Devin Booker. That's massive. And so for that, he's, projected to be one of the top teams in this league for this year, too. I mean, all 3 of us are definitely projected to be in the playoffs in this league. Going into my team on here, I have working with Anthony Davis. I got to deal with his mega contract coming up in the future. I think I have 2 years left before I have to worry about that, though. Drew Holiday is here. Scotty Barnes, who I've been very, very thrilled with his performance so far to start this year. PJ Washington, Aaron Gordon, Clint Capella, Dario Saric. I do have a couple of rookie contracts that I'm waiting on. So I have Anthony Black, Max Christie, and I did retain my first for this year to have some flexibility with that too. So, having the flexibility of just in case if I did have injuries to AD or something like that, I would have that ability to tank. Or if I'm doing well and I don't need to tank, I can trade that first for, potentially some more help right before playoffs. So, as we talk about these types of strategies, this just goes to show for somebody who is not in a league of this size and who doesn't play in a salary format that, this is so much more intuitive than, a redraft league, which are still fun, but this is just a whole different animal. So I encourage people to start trying out this new type of format. And, that's something where we are most heavily considering doing this exact type of format, a 30-team salary league, when we run our first Angle Dynasty League over this summer. So with, hopefully with this video or a podcast like this one, it's going to help somebody to be convinced to get into a league of this size, as well as also show them that there's resources out there. So like I said, one like Spot Track, where you can track player salaries, really helps you in doing the math to figure out your cap for this year and next year. Basketball Reference actually shows salaries as well too. At the bottom of the player page, it shows salaries. And then we at Angle have we have dynasty rankings here too. So this will help you out in evaluating trades as well as your draft and your dynasty league. So right now, these dynasty rankings are accurate as of August 11th. So what we have going on here is each analyst, myself, Mitchell, and Braxton, have our individual ranks posted on here. And then the 4th column is an average of all 3 of us combined. So that's the average ranking of what our 3 opinions are on, or what our 3 rankings are, I should say, on this. So one thing that we will be announcing here is that we have a Dynasty rank update coming where the whole presentation and format of this is going to change. We're going to have comments on our individual Dynasty rankings too. So that's something to be looking forward to in this month of November coming out here, over these weeks now. One thing I wanted to talk about with you, Brax, before we go is our articles that you and I are doing. So you and I have started up some weekly articles. First, go ahead and tell us about the one that you've been doing.
Yeah, so I've just been putting together a small buy and sell list. They're more targeted towards deeper leagues at this point, as opposed to like 10 or 12 team redraft. Just because I'm in a lot of deeper leagues, uh, but it's just a small list of guys that I like going into each week, and ones that I think maybe people are a little bit too high on. And then especially with the last one, I threw in a couple extremely deep sleepers in Matt Ryan and Drew Smith, for example, in terms of how they could fare is I guess 30 team pickups. So that's something to keep an eye out on. And yeah, it's 5 to 7 guys, and just a little blurb about them, how I feel about them, and yeah.
Very good. And so with that too, also on our same blog, you'll see a weekly newsletter coming in from me. So this is just talking about current events, some just different stories that I want to share regarding, my or others' experiences, watching the NBA or participating in Dynasty basketball, as well as just, some different blurbs on Dynasty or fantasy basketball advice for you too. Like, please hold this player. You can drop this player now. Things like that. So you guys are going to be seeing that weekly from Braxton and I on our WordPress. So we have the link for that posted up on our Twitter. We can put that in the description for this video too. And you'll start seeing that if you follow us on Twitter. You'll start seeing us posting whenever we have our articles put out too. So Brax, thanks for being with me today. It's we're early in the dynasty season, so I'm excited to see how this goes when especially when we end up going head to head in our dynasty leagues. What are you looking forward to most this season? Or actually, let me ask you this. Let me ask you your take. Who do you think wins the in season tournament?
Oh man. God, I mean, I hope the Hornets, right? I think it's so out in the open right now.
Right.
It's tough to determine how hard these teams are going to play. I mean, obviously they're regular season games, so they should be playing hard, right? But are some teams going to want this more than others? Maybe, is LeBron not going to care? Probably. So, maybe I would like for a young team to, get a little taste of some winning, as opposed to kind of
Totally.
rotting away at the bottom of the standings for 4 years. Not that the Hornets have been rotting away, but it could be some excitement for a young team in a season that maybe isn't going to be the best for them.
Right. My pick for that, since it's going to be, since it is single elimination format, I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I want to see the Oklahoma City Thunder win this one. This is a team that is starting to break into the playoffs, and like you said, I want to also see a young team win this one. I'm not entirely sure if teams, led by some of the more stalwart veterans in this league are going to fully care about this or not. I mean, I would assume they are just because they're competitors and they're going to be in regular season NBA games, but I would really like to see a young team win it. And due to the fact that it's single elimination with their unique style of play, I think it would be fun to put something on the Oklahoma City Warriors to win that one. So we'll be watching
Oklahoma
that one
City
and all of
Thunder.
oh
Thunder. You said
Warriors. Why did I
Warriors.
say Warriors? Sorry, it's getting late. Oklahoma City Thunder, not the Warriors. Sorry, Mitch.
And
Okay.
I will add, there's a little bit of a fantasy impact, Andrew. I don't know if you saw this. There's like week 9, I think, or week 10 of the schedule actually isn't even built out yet, just because I think it's waiting on results from that in-season tournament. So,
Oh,
in terms of what fantasy is going to look like that week, maybe there's some weird oddities going on. If you look at the schedule, there's a lot of this, at least early in the season. It's kind of there's these really heavy game days, and then some days where it's like there's 2 games. That's going to continue for like the next few weeks. especially in November, which we've just entered, where they're playing those games on Tuesday and Friday. They've structured the schedule really unusually, at least compared to older seasons. So I mean, it has an effect on fantasy, right? If you get if you have some top guys on those teams that have schedules on those low volume days, maybe you could pull out to a lead earlier on in your league.
Hmm. Very good. Well, that's a great point. That's something we're definitely going to have to keep a close eye on, and we'll be sure to keep people updated as it goes in regards to the fantasy impact that this unique schedule that they're doing this year has. So with that being said, Brax, I thank you for joining me today. This concludes the second episode of the podcast. A lot to look forward to with content drops this month with the new Dynasty rankings. Like we said, mine and Brax's articles are going to keep coming out weekly. Later on this month, Mitch and I are attending the G League Ignite versus the South Bay Lakers. So you're going to see a little bit of videos of just our time going together and how that all goes for us at the game and everything. And yeah, it's going to be a fun season. I'm excited to see how our redraft and dynasty teams play out, and we'll catch back up on this soon to see how things are going and see if there's any new topics to discuss. Thanks, Brax.
Yeah, man.